All right, so how you get these pistons out of a caliper like this, and we're going to talk about this type of caliper with two pots or two pistons. A lot of times they're called pots, I don't know why. So if you had like a racing bike or high performance bike, you might even have 3 or 4 small ones on each side. They oppose each other as opposed to just 2 on one side. And when you have the 2 on one side, it's really important that this moves. It moves now, but it didn't a moment ago when I was trying it. Because as the brake pads wear, this has to move and compensate for it. So when this pushes out a little bit further, it actually moves the whole caliper over because of course this side's a fixed side. So this is the situation on one of these. They're very simple to work with, but they can be a real pain in the butt because these guys are in the way. If you have one that's got like 6 pot or 4 pot, 2 on each side, not always, but almost always, those calipers split in half. You know, they'll have cap bolts or something on one side and a seal that goes between the 2 halves, which can help you out because if you take them apart, you can get directly in here with a tool that kind of spread out inside there, which I do have. I'll show you what I have. And you can get right up on top of it and use it to twist this thing out. With this one, with this side where the, I guess this would be the inner, yeah, the inner what is it called? I need a CT scan. The inner pad goes, the stationary pad, this is going to get in our way. So we're just going to work around it. So I always recommend stripping your pads down to nothing, which I can't do all the way on this one because I can't get this spring out all the way with the piston sticking out. But we can pull this guy out and then these rubber guys. And that's pretty much stripped down. All the rest of the other parts are here in this bag, labeled cylinder head. And I do that for the thieves, you know, if you got one of those guys that, you know, twist their mustache coming in here in the middle of the night going, I'm gonna steal me some brake parts. They'll look at this and go, oh, they ain't brake parts, it's cylinder head. Either that or it's just a bag I picked up and I haven't bothered to label it yet, you know, one or the other. First thing I do when I take one of these calipers out is I want to see if I can push the pistons in a little bit, if I can get them moving by hand. It gives me an idea just how stuck they are. Now these, I forgot to mention, these are the old calipers from the Magna. I replaced those with a pair of calipers from eBay. I only did that for convenience and aesthetics. I wanted another pair for convenience so I didn't have to take the sidecar rig out of service, and aesthetics because I wanted another pair I could paint up and make look nice to kind of match the front end work that I had done with all that remachining and painting and so forth. Those old calipers really stood out like a sore thumb. They don't look much better because the brake lines are 42 years old. I eventually want to replace those. But overall, if you kind of omit that part of it, they look a lot better than the ones that came off here. These were kind of crusty as far as the innards go, which I'll talk about here in a little bit. As far as these, that's the reason why I did it. I mean, I didn't have to do it. I could have taken the ones that I'm working with on this video and painted them up, but I didn't want to do it, so I just got another pair to work with. I really should have filmed those because that would have made good content except for the potty mouth. One side, I think it was the right side, was the most difficult to get out I've ever experienced as far as these pistons. Definitely destroyed the pistons, but I had already bought a kit from Brake Crafters that included all the rubber parts and new, I'm not sure if I got the stainless ones, but new pistons. I recommend that. You might as well just buy a kit that's got the pistons, but you don't always need to do it, even with, like where you see a little pitting over here. This is on the outside edge, and that's the outside end, obviously, and that's really never going to be in that far. It really isn't, because even with pads in here, this thing's not going to be flush up in there. So if, for example, when we pull this out, when we finally get it out, if we don't destroy it, if it's good past this point in, we could actually reuse these pistons. Those suckers are not going to budge. So the first thing I'm going to do now that I know they're pretty stuck is I'm going to hit them with some PB Blaster. I got to take the bleeder out. I forgot to do that. Let's unscrew the bleeder, take it out, and we'll shoot some PB Blaster down inside here as well to kind of get behind there. But why they get stuck in the first place is because brake fluid being hygroscopic gets water, moisture absorbed into it, and the moisture gets down, settles down inside here, and it starts to corrode the aluminum, dissimilar metals, and even where the rubber is for the seal, there's a pressure seal and a dust seal. The dust seal is on the outside, the pressure seal is in. We'll show you that again in a little bit. And that seal is set up in a groove that's actually angled like this. Lip of the seal actually goes in and kind of is closer to the center, larger diameter, if you will, than the outer part of the seal. That way, when it puts pressure on it, the seal kind of presses up against the piston and really seals it off. And again, I'll show you that in more detail. I don't have a set of seals here to show you, but once we get these apart, I can. So we're gonna load this up with some blaster first and see if we can at least get some in there, let it sit for a bit, and then we'll come back. Next step that I recommend you do is not just hook these up to some sort of a pressure and device like compressed air. In fact, I do not recommend compressed air, but I've done it myself. It's very dangerous. I will show you it though, and how to do it safely. But the best way to do this is actually with a separate, like a front brake master cylinder or some sort of a setup. Like I did when I was testing that cam chain tensioner revisit thing where I modified the that front brake master cylinder to do that. Because all I have to do is put the bleeder back in and close it, and then just put a banjo on here, put a little brake fluid in. It doesn't even have to be, you know, any more than half bled, and then you'll be able to push these out with that kind of pressure usually. But I'm gonna go off the assumption that nobody's got that kind of setup. So what we're gonna do is I'm gonna use the compressed air method, but I'm gonna show you how you can do it real safely. Or make sure you have the appropriate safety equipment like safety squints and things like that. But the first thing we want to do is I'm actually going to try to push these in a little bit with like a C-clamp. I want to break them loose. Even if I'm pushing them in is fine because I got some blaster on the inside. I've got some blaster here on the outside. And if I can drag a little bit of that in and just break these loose, that stiction that they have with the rubber seals, it can be a hell of a lot easier to push out if we can just get them moving a little bit. So that's the first thing I recommend. You can use a pair of those like welding vice grips. Can use a C-clamp. I'm just going to get a C-clamp and use that. I got me a cute little C-clamp here from my stash on the bench here, on Dad's old bench. And I'm just going to go ahead and put a little pressure on it and see if it'll move in. See how hard it is. And that's not too bad. It's actually moving already. These aren't that stuck, luckily. But it still helps. See, it's going in pretty good right there. Hopefully you're in shot. Yeah, see how that moves pretty easy? Now, if that's super duper tight, don't be afraid, you know, with the appropriate size C-clamp. Obviously, this is kind of a baby C-clamp, but put some pressure on that and get it moving. It's not gonna hurt nothing. If you're worried about the Honda thing of this side, or just put a piece of aluminum there or something, but for demonstration purposes, and these are just going to be spares that are on the shelf once I clean them up and put them back together. Probably, I don't even know if I'm going to use new seals because these seals are fairly new. These things have just gotten stuck because I didn't do the brake flushes like I was supposed to on that. And these things were working like crap. So this one is a little snugger, but there it goes. It kind of just gets tight and then it goes in. So it's getting, kind of pulling that rubber. And then the rubber's sticking going, I don't want to let go, I don't want to let go. And then it lets go and then it's a lot easier to do. We're just going to stop there, then we got them moving. Now I'll show you that tool that you can reach in if it's long enough. I know the feeling. If it's long enough, then you can reach past and grab the inside of that bore of the piston. Now not every one of these is in this way where you have the big opening. I have run into them on, I cannot remember the make, model, or year. I have run into them where they had something pressed in here. They were installed this way, but there was actually a piece pressed in. Geez, which ones were those? I can't remember which one. But in this case, when you got an open one, or you got the little thing that sits inside here that'll just pop out, then you can utilize something like that if you can get in there. All right, so here's that tool. I got this from a place called ELS, ExpensiveLightweightStuff.com. And this one, you can sort of kind of get in there somewhat. And all you do is you crank this up. It's like a pair of regular vice grips, except they go the other way. Or maybe these are modified vice grips, I don't know. What these are designed for is the ZRX calipers, where you split the calipers and you can get right up in there. And there's actually an adjustment, like a ball thing that goes on the end, which I have in the drawer over there. I never use it. But you can, a lot of times, even if it's a little bit of an angle, you can get in here with a tool like this and get it to bite just enough. Nope. But it's, you know, it's always worth a try. But once you get the piston out further, these do work. So if the piston was out like this far, then you could stick that right in and finish it out. But we got to get it that far. So since we've already pushed it in, it's going to move. Let's go over and put some air to it safely, and I'll show you how to do that. And again, here's a disclaimer. I'm only showing you this with due regard to safety. I'm going to essentially absolve myself of any liability if you crack yourself in the skull with a high velocity piston that you pressed out at 300 psi air pressure, okay? All right, folks, we're over here at the Edelweiss. Still waiting on that record deal for singing. Anyway, I'm over here in the Weiss, and I have this kind of clamped up, not normally like I do it, but if I do it the way I normally do, you can't see. Normally, you guys will have an air compressor kit from one of the box stores that has one of these guys in it, air chucks with the rubber tip on it. You know, it's kind of like what proctologists use. Yeah! You know, for certain operations. You get yourself a piece of wood, and also like this. I also like to use these plastic wedges you got. I think I got them from Harbor Freight a while ago. Those work really well too, because what we're going to do in this one is we are going to take them out completely with the air. Get them up to the point where we can just wiggle them out by hand. And one of them is going to want to go more than the other. They almost never go exactly the same because one's usually tighter than the other for whatever reason. More corrosion, the other one's got less, who knows. I really don't recommend you doing it this way. But if you got to get these things out, I want you to do it safely. So that's my statement for the lawyers out there. So what I'm going to do is bring my airline over. The compressor right now is sitting at about 130 psi. I'm going to turn the regulator down, but I'm not going to put it up to full pressure. I'm going to put it up to about 60. We don't need to be putting high pressure on this if they're going to start to move with lower pressure. It's just safer that way. So we got a piece of wood in here, and I'm just going to start putting a little pressure in here. Make sure you got your safety glasses on. I honestly do have mine on. I don't want to get blinded from this thing. I have my other gloves on for this because they're heavier. So we already tried that. Let me just get it a little bit more. Oh, there you go. See how that just jumped up at 60, 70 psi? And if we didn't have the wood there, or your finger was in there, it would be sayonara to something. So now we can kind of work the wood out, and you see how high they are as far as sticking up. So these are relatively easy compared to other ones. And because we left the air on long enough with that wood there, they even themselves out. And many times you'll have one that's stuck way down inside and the other one's moving. So you got to block that one off. You got to stop that. Let's say it's this one. It's easier for you to see. This one is moving, but the other one is stuck. So you want to block this one off. So in this case, all we would do is we put like a block of wood over here and start to get this one moving with like another block of wood or something over here to let it go. Or you can put this back across. It doesn't really matter because it's going to only go so far, but at least that way you can see. Doesn't really matter how you do it, like I said, as long as you do it safely. This is why I have these wedges now, these plastic wedges, because what I can do with these is I can put them in like this and then put some air on it again, let them come up. Okay, now it's come up on both. Then I can kind of move them out a little bit further. It's a little fiddly, but you can get it. There you go, it's a little bit further. Now we're quite a ways out. And these are playing nice, trust me, compared to most of them. So what you should be able to do now, you should be able to start wiggling them when they get out to a certain point. These are not there yet. These got to be just barely in for this to work. So I think what I'm going to do is, on this one, I'm going to block off one that stays in where it's at right now. This one here. Because I want to show you how to get that one out with that tool. And we'll move this one up to it just barely there. And then we can wiggle that one out. A little bit more. And these wedges are real excellent for this because you pull them back and it allows it to come up more and more and more. They are really deceiving how long they are. You'd think they're shorter, but they're not. Tell you what. I'm not going there. Now you can just blow that right out if you want with air. But I don't like these things flying around because it might get dented when it hits whatever it hits, like your head or something. Let's try this guy. Oh, it did come out. Well, that's how it sounds when it pops out and it scares the crap out of you. I tried to not have that happen because I don't want it to go flying, but since I had the wedge in there, it didn't go flying. So there's piston numero uno. Let me go schedule that CT. Now let's go take that tool, because right now we're not going to be able to pressure it. We've got an open hole. So we're going to have to get this out by just basically yanking it out with something. And that's what we'll do with that tool. Now, if you're going to use air to get both of these out, you just do them one at a time, a little bit, till you get them both up where when you get it up to the edge, just before this thing popped out, you can start wiggling that thing by hand, and it'll come out eventually. But right now, this one is in too deep still, because obviously I purposefully left that deeper because I want to use this. And so now I can get a lot deeper in here with this and get a good clamp on it. So we just put a little bit more penetrating oil in there. And this is a nice tool. It really is very handy for this. I certainly like this a lot better, but you got to get the pistons out to a certain point. There we go. Ta-da! So nice tool. We'll go ahead and inspect this, but I want to clean it up first and show you a close-up whether or not we could reuse it or not, or kind of give you an idea if you want to make a decision to reuse these or not. I would just replace them. The kits from brakecrafters.com, which I pretty much use exclusively, they are not much more expensive than just the rubber parts when you add the metal parts as far as these pistons. And the stainless kits, if available for the particular application you're looking for, are not much more than the regular steel ones. We're just going to reach in here carefully and pull out the seal. Big fat one. And then the outer seal is really a dust seal, and it's just a little skinny guy. Like this. Now these are not in terrible shape compared to others. All right, I'm going to try my best to show you something here. I've taken a couple of takes and I'm having a really hard time with the autofocus on this. Obviously the seals are in this one. We're going to show you what I'm going to describe here on these here momentarily. If you look inside the bore, you can see a line that my screwdriver's kind of laying on. Forward of that line, rather, the bore is that bore where the groove is about parallel. It is parallel with the bore that the piston goes in. So from here forward, it's the same plane straight across. But back here, past that groove, you can even see the surface finish is a little bit different. That is a little bit of an angle, and truth be told, a little bit of a radius. There's a radius at that very end, where in the front there isn't. And I know that's pretty much square in the front, but in the back. Now the purpose of that angle, which is essentially described in this terms here, if this is parallel with the bore, okay, the back of that is kind of like that, a slight angle up, but the front of it's like that. So why they do that? Why is that difference in that bore as far as that backside being angled? This is a bidirectional seal, and as such, it goes either way. In other words, you don't have a particular way it goes in this way or that way. Being that this inside is essentially a smaller diameter and a little bit angled up, well, the angle in the radius actually make it a smaller diameter. It pushes this inside. Let's say this is the inside. It'll push this inside to do this. It'll kind of roll the seal and angle it slightly. Now when it angles slightly, it tightens up the back side here. Circumferentially, there's your word for the day. Circumferentially it does that. So what that does is when you put pressure in, this is the pressure side, so this would be positive pressure, and this would be atmospheric pressure obviously on the other side of the seal. This is pushing that fluid around this piston, because this piston is not super tight in that bore, and it's pushing the piston, but it's also getting around, and the laws of hydraulics, is the same pressure is going to be here as it is going to be here, as long as it can get from one point to the other. So it's going to put pressure on that seal, it's going to put pressure on the back of the piston, and what it's going to do is it's going to create a higher pressure location on the back there because of that angle, and therefore really seal this off. The higher the pressure you put into it, the more this thing is going to kind of seal itself up to the piston. That's why they do that. So there's an angle I think we can handle in editing to get you a little bit tighter shot. Yeah, because that's definitely a little angled where, and you can feel it too if you had your finger in here. Right here, there's really no contact, significant contact with the screwdriver. But back in the back, as we go in, it ramps up. So there's an angle to it because of this spot over here. Now, how that plays a role in what I'm about to tell you here is the reason why you can use one of these, they're all pretty much corroded and pitted, is because of that feature right there. Because it's really not relying strictly on the entire amount there. It's really just a high pressure point on the back side of here where it contacts inside this bore to seal that off. Even if you got a pretty corroded bore, unless it's not really super bad, these things are real tight when you put them in and get the piston in when they're new and in good shape. These are actually in pretty good shape because I did them a couple of years ago. So this is almost like new. So if we were to put this back in, which I can do real quick for you, and you use a little bit of brake fluid, and I'm not going to go over the rebuilding part. I have videos on that like I said, that's why I'm doing the taking apart part. But when you go to put this guy back in with some brake fluid and some red grease or brake grease, this is a tight fit on that seal. And when it does that, it pushes it out in the manner I explained before, with the emphasis on that high spot in the back here, which again you can feel if you stuck your finger in there. So even if you got one that's real crudded up, 9 out of 10 times, or maybe even 99 out of 100 times, they're going to seal up pretty well. And I've had them super bad, where they were super crusty. Chances are it's going to seal up with new seals, and partially, if not exclusively, for the reason I just showed you with the differences in the shape of that groove as far as that angle goes. To use or reuse rather, or not to reuse, just get new ones. They're not that expensive, but if you got to get something back in service real quick and you've got a seal kit and you just don't have any pistons, you got to make a decision whether you're going to use it or not. You can rub your finger over that and only feel a little bit. Now what I normally do with these, and we'll go do it real quick, we'll put it in the lathe and spin it up 800 RPM or so, put some 1000 grit in there, and we'll polish this up and see how it looks after we polish it up. These little pits and stuff on the end are not going to clean up. But this thing not going to be riding with this thing all the way in. It's going to be riding about there, even with brand new pads. Maybe about right there. So most likely this would work, but let's go clean it up really quick. See, here's where it's really nice to even have a mini lathe or something. Just lightly chuck them. Power on. I know I'm at 800 already because I was just using it the other day. A little bit of WD on the part and on the 1000 grit. Turn that off. This is all I'm going to do on this one, because in the interest of brevity, just to show you this. See how nicely that cleaned up. Let's wipe it off again with a dirty rag this time. And there's some staining on it, but no really nasty. This is perfectly usable again if you had to, but my recommendation always is to replace these. BrakeCrafters.com, not a sponsor. I recommend their stuff because I trust their stuff, and it's OE quality, if not exactly OE, because they source OE parts a lot of times and put them in their kits. So if you had to reuse these, which I'm going to, I'm just going to put these back together as is and put them on a shelf. In case I needed them in the future, they'll be fine. Another way you could do this is via the bleeder here, under pressure. In this case, what I've read about only, I've never done it, is to use a grease gun. I would think that would be kind of messy. I'm not sure if a grease gun would fit over this kind of a nipple here. I don't think it will. For example, here is a regular nipple. I'll put it right up here so you can see it right next to it kind of. But that little nipple right there sure as hell don't look like that nipple over there. So I would think that you'd have to make some sort of an adapter or buy some sort of an adapter for it. But you never know, you know. Let's try to slip a grease nipple over that and see if it goes. I mean, it'll have to be backed off. Means it'll leak out the side, but will it provide enough? Like I said, enough pressure that is. I don't know, I've never done this, so I've only read about it. Oh, you never know, maybe it will. My grease gun's basically a piece of crap, so I have to tighten this thing up so it'll actually hold. I don't know if this is gonna work, you know, in regards to putting grease in there. I'm sure it's gonna make a huge mess, but I don't know, let's try it. Let's just give it a shot. Now I have the banjo open. I just want to see if this will actually even take grease in there. Oh, well, you know what? It is. You know what? That might work. Son of a gun. Let's get something to block off the banjo with. You know, with I have a bolt and a sealing washer that'll work for that. And let's see if that'll work. What might be just as cool to do in tandem with this is fill the brake caliper up with brake fluid. You know, turn it 90 degrees to the right. And then put some sort of a bolt stopper. Like I said, I have some. That way it takes up some of the space, because all we want to do is generate pressure. I don't know, maybe this will work. Now, worst case scenario is we go over to the lathe and we make a little adapter. I think this is quarter 28 at this end. And then whatever that is, probably M8. I'm not really sure what that thread is. All right, so it's capped off with this. Cap bolt, M10 1.25 typically is these threads on the Japanese ones. So I just stuck one in with a crush washer. It's going to leak, but it's going to do what we need to do. And I filled this caliper up with old brake fluid. I'm not even going to use new brake fluid, because I'm not going to waste my good brake fluid for that. And just to take up some of the space. Like I said, I've never done this before, but I've read about it. And there's some guys that really swear by it. So let's go ahead and put this in the vise just to hold it in place. I typically would not clamp it this way because it's just kind of precarious, but if I don't, you guys aren't going to be able to see it. I'm going to go ahead and put our thingamajiggy from the grease gun on here. I got my grease gun kind of put together with different parts here and stuff, because these things really suck. They really do. I mean, these grease guns, no matter which one you get, I mean, they're just absolute junk as far as being able to hold on a grease nipple and do what they're supposed to do. I still haven't found one that's worth a damn. So I'm just gonna crack this thing open a little bit. It's open too far now, I think. So I'm just gonna give it like 3/4 of a turn, see what happens. It's just gonna make a huge mess is what it's gonna do, and waste grease, but you can always buy more grease. It's starting to get a little bit more, let me back out a little bit. It's starting to get a little bit more stiff. Yeah, I think it's moving. One of them is. Yeah, look at that. The left one is definitely moving. Yeah, I've never done this before. This actually works pretty well. But we got to get both out. So this is where like a wedge or a piece of wood or something is going to come into play. So we need to wedge this one so it don't come out any further, so we can let the other one kind of catch up. It is not making a terrible mess either on the back side. I hope I have enough grease here. Make sure we got enough room there. Yeah. Look at that. Oh yeah, that's getting real hard now, because there it goes. Now it let go. See, I didn't push this one in. Remember before I showed you to push it in to break it loose with some PB Blaster? I didn't do any of that on this one. I just took it as it was. Started screwing with it. So it finally let go. Hell, that works. I might start doing this on every one of them. Unfortunately, it wastes a little grease, but it is very controlled. This one is the more stuck one than this one, because when I alternate back and forth, this one is harder than that. Okay, that one is getting real close, and there's back pressure in here. Should engineer some sort of a valve to put in here to release it, because this thing wants to keep going. Yeah, that one is stuck on the left. They gotta be getting real close. You see down there, we're only losing a little bit of grease. Yeah, I bet you those will come out by hand now. Let's just keep pushing until one goes, and then we'll just take the other one out. There she goes. Remember, same rules apply. There's pressure on this. One, two. Look at that. That worked out pretty damn well. I'm really surprised. Only a little bit of grease down in here we lost. The rest of it's pretty damn good. So what happens if everything you try doesn't work? Air compressor pressure, grease gun pressure, using another master cylinder. What if they all fail? What do you do then? You take the whole thing and dump it in the ultrasonic, 50, 55 centigrade, leave it for however long you need to. A lot of times the heat can penetrate with the fluid and break it loose where you can physically abuse it at that point. And that brings us to right here, where we're going to continue to physically abuse it. We're going to put some more heat on it. Then we're going to cool it with some cool water, preferably refrigerated water. We're going to get on it with these suckers, okay? And we're going to get in here and we're just going to be twisting and pulling and twisting. And sometimes you can put pressure on it while you're doing it, which I'll show you here in a second, but dangerous. We're going to be just going all He-Man on this thing, kind of like this. This is how a piston looks when it comes out like that. From doing that kind of He-Man kind of abuse on it, that's just the way it is, unfortunately, when they're that stuck. You just got to get abusive on them. Heat, cold, heat, cold, heat, cold, penetrating oil. And like I said before, if you need to put some pressure on it, this is what I do. Now, I don't recommend you doing this, but if you have to, and this is what I use if all else fails, and I have to go He-Man like I just showed you with the big old channel locks and heat and cold and penetrating oil. It helps if you put pressure on it from the backside, said the wife, and that way it continues to put pressure on it as you're trying to turn that thing mechanically with the channel locks. It is dangerous, as I said. And all I did was I took a air compressor nipple male and I turned down the end of a banjo bolt and then I think I single point threaded it to make it close to whatever that was, then soldered it together, and then you just tighten that sucker up and you got yourself a constant air pressure going in. It is dangerous, like I said, because you got pressure going into it, you got heat in there because you're heating it and cooling it, and also you're doing your thing with your channel locks. Thor's hammer kind of thing, you know? You're beating the heck out of it, twisting the heck out of it, trying to get the thing out while it's got pressure coming out. Again, last resort only. I do not recommend you doing it unless you know what you're doing, because it can be really dangerous. Sometimes you got to do what you got to do. But I don't want you to get hurt, so just be very careful if you do that. Are we done with this video yet? Almost. One final point here before we close it out. And I know you're thinking about it because I can hear you saying it in your heads, telepathically. I'm receiving your transmission. Message received. Yes, you can definitely take the master cylinder of the bike you're working on, disconnect the master cylinder from its mounting points, but don't disconnect it from the brake hose or the brake line, and try to pressure the pistons out using the master cylinder itself. I didn't mention that earlier, probably should have made that more clear. This video is really about really crudded up ones. In other words, a bike that's been sitting for 100 years, and we're gonna make the assumption that the master cylinder is compromised as well. But if it's not compromised, you can definitely try that. Ease each piston out using a piece of wood or little wedges or something, get them out to the point where you can get them wiggled out or however else you want to take them out. Most definitely you can do that though. So thanks for thinking it, because I forgot to say it before. Well guys, that's about it. Hope you got some, hope you got something out of this, and I hope you learned something. I sure did. I haven't done that deal with a grease gun to take out the pistons in a caliper before. Like I said, I've only read about it. That worked really well. And you saw the other methods, and I'm not going to beat a dead horse on this, on the safety issue. I've already covered it. There's a disclaimer you probably already saw at the very beginning of this video. Don't do it this way unless you absolutely have to and you know what you're doing and you have the proper safety equipment, because you can hurt yourself. So we want to make sure that you stay safe and you don't do something dumb, because I do a lot of dumb stuff. That way you don't have to. Remember, a piston in the center of the forehead leaves a big dent when it hits you at a high velocity. And for you guys out there with your modeling careers, and I know you're out there, that's not going to bode too well for your career. So you want to keep that one in mind. All joking aside, safety first. Don't do it that way unless you have to. I guess that's going to be about it on summarizing this video. You don't need a summary, you already saw it. Next video is coming up. We got to get back into the Magna. We got carb problem again. And I'm not saying this just to generate content. I'll show you a little teaser clip coming up here really quick. But what's happening is under hard throttle, she's breaking up again, just like she used to, but not quite as bad. So here's that clip. It's kind of hard to hear, but it is breaking up and it's a little underpowered. It's one cylinder. I don't believe it's spark. It's definitely carburetor, because it's doing the same thing, like I said, just to the not a severity that it used to. And it's the right side. And what I didn't show you is it's got a lot of D-cell popping too. There's got to be a vacuum leak in there. I think when I sat the carbs back in, I remember pretty clearly they didn't really pop in. They kind of smushed in. And that was part of the video that I failed to record because something happened. I pressed the record and it didn't take it. So on this video coming up, and go right to the point where we're getting ready to pull the carbs out. In a different perspective, we're going to pull the sidecar off. I'm going to pull the, there ain't no we, it's me. I'm going to pull the sidecar off of this thing. I'm going to get you right in there, because now I can access that right side. The carb's going to come out that way anyway. And you can see things a lot better. And I had a lot of questions about that in the last video. Hopefully this will clear it up. So that one's coming up. You got to stick around to see it. As always, thanks for watching. Don't just repair, restore. Stick around and we'll see you on the next video. And I got to get this spring out of here that holds the pads in, but unfortunately the pistons are in the way. We can get these guys out, which is a pin. Oh man, these are stuck too. I hope you got something out of this video in regards to removing the calipers. No. All right, so I don't think that's right. Take 8,365. And if all three of these fail, and you got a little bit of that, I said calipers again. So anyway, back to what we were talking about. What were we talking about? I've already beat it to a dead horse about horse? Seal grooves or packing grooves that are in these calipers. I'm not going to go into great detail here in an intro.